record button. So welcome everyone. My name is Caitlin Mivas. I'm the Director of Preservation at the Landmark Society. As you know, we're going to be talking about an exciting project that we are working on with the Highland Park Neighborhood Association in the neighborhoods in and around Highland Park. And I will turn it over to my colleague, Megan Clem, who will take it from here. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I will either interrupt Megan with them if they're timely, or we may save them to the end. But please feel free to dump all your questions in the chat while Megan's talking, and we will be sure to answer all questions before we end tonight. All right, Megan, you're up.
All right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for attending this tonight. I'm Megan Clem. I'm a preservation planner at the Landmark Society. So I will be one of the people kind of leading this project, and you'll be learning more about that momentarily. So I'm going to just go ahead and jump right into the presentation. So tonight we're talking about National Register nominations that will be taking place around the Highland Park area. Let's see if it's going to let me advance. There we go. First, I want to start out just kind of clarifying who is who in the preservation world. I know sometimes it can get confusing about who you're working with and what this means. So in the world of historic preservation, there are some different organizations and agencies that we categorize between government and then private and not-for-profit. And then within that, there's local, state, and national levels of each of these things. So you can kind of see this graph on your screen right now. At the local level with your government, you have your city, village, and town. So that would be Rochester here. And then on the private nonprofit side, you have our organization, the Landmark Society of Western New York. And we are housed right in your own neighborhood in Highland Park in the Warner Castle. At the state level, you have the New York State Historic Preservation Office, shortened to be called SHPO or SHPO. We will be working closely with them on these nominations. They'll be going through them. At the nonprofit side, you've got the Preservation League of New York. They are your statewide nonprofit preservation organization. And then at the national level, you have the National Park Service, which you'll be learning a little bit more about because your nominations will be going all the way up to the National Park Service. On the nonprofit side, you have the national level, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which is the national nonprofit preservation organization. So that's just to kind of help you get a little bit of your bearings about who's who and who does what. So the Landmark Society, which is Caitlin and I and all of our other colleagues, we are the nonprofit side at the local level. All right, so who we are, again, we're a nonprofit membership-based organization. We were founded in 1937, so we're one of the oldest and longest running nonprofit preservation organizations. And we serve Monroe, Wayne, Seneca, Ontario, Yates, Livingston, Wyoming, Genesee, and Orleans counties. And with some of our programs we're working on, we reach down into the southern tier a little further as well. Some of the things we do, you'll be learning about that tonight. We work with groups doing National Register nominations, placing historic districts and individual buildings on the National Register of Historic Places. We do public events and public outreach and education related to different preservation issues going on. We advocate, do preservation advocacy, which can be for tax credit programs, which you'll learn about later, or endangered historic buildings, all sorts of things like that. We also host the New York Statewide Preservation Conference. Caitlin is in charge of that, and that's actually taking place in 2 weeks. So that'll be happening soon. We also meet with property owners, homeowners. We can give general guidance and advice for work to your properties and take a look at things with you to let you know what might be historically appropriate for your property. We also have a program called Old House Help, where we help homeowners fill out their tax credit application should they choose to use that program, which you'll be learning about a little later this evening. And then we do things like support local communities and assist property owners and developers, local governments and neighborhoods like yours. All right, so we'll jump right into it. What is the National Register of Historic Places? This was a list that's established by the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. It's an official list of historic buildings, sites, structures, and objects that are recognized as significant in our history. So it's American history. It can be under architecture, archaeology, engineering, culture. And these resources can be listed either individually or, as you'll learn more about tonight, as contributing to a historic district. And that's the portion we'll be referencing tonight. This is an honorary designation. This is a really important point to make. I want to make sure that you all hear this. It's an honorary designation, so there are no restrictions to private property owners, so long as there's not any state or federal funding involved in a project at your property. So again, no restrictions to private property owners. It's just honorary designation. And on the right-hand side, you can just see an image of what the first page of a National Register form looks like. And this one happens to be for the South Wedge Historic District. So with that, what is a historic district? A district is a group of properties such as residential neighborhoods, which is what we'll be doing with your neighborhood, commercial downtowns and industrial complexes. They have a district boundary, which is determined by several things, such as the history and development of the neighborhood, and then also the historic integrity of the buildings within the proposed district. So that's talking about materials and its appearance, its setting, the streetscape, all of those kind of things. Then within the historic district, each individual property is classified as either contributing or non-contributing. Generally, if you are non-contributing, it's because your building was built outside of a period of significance, which is what we use as justification for why the district is important and should be listed. So it's either not a historic building, or sometimes it's just been so altered that it doesn't retain its historic appearance any longer. And so that would also lead to it being non-contributing. And then this is also a clarification to make: a National Register Historic District is not the same thing as a local preservation district that Rochester has. So we are talking specifically about the National Register Historic Districts tonight. All right, this map shows you some of the different, well, all the projects that we'll be working on in the Highland Park area with all of the historic districts. So currently what you see, that large area kind of in a teal color, is the Mount Hope Highland Historic District. Right now that encompasses Mount Hope Cemetery, and then down Mount Hope Avenue a bit, and over into the park and into Highland Park. So the district that we'll be doing here is just expanding the existing historic district that's already there. So you can see in the, there are 4 green, well, I guess they're all different shapes, but those green areas that you see surrounding that teal are where we're going to be expanding the historic district. So if you own a property or your home is there, you will become part of the Mount Hope Highland Historic District. Then we have the Azalea Historic District. This was one that the State Preservation Office said, you know, could stand on its own and didn't have to be part of the Mount Hope Highland. So this one will have a boundary that is roughly what you see in that light pink, kind of light purple color, just below, just south of Highland. So the boundary is roughly Highland Avenue to the north, South Goodman Street to the east, Elmwood Avenue to the south, and Meadowbrook Road to the west. Then we have another new historic district that we'll be working on, which is the Ellwanger and Berry in the Highland Park Historic District. That is to the north of everything you see on that map there, in kind of the a little bit darker purple color. So the boundary for this district is roughly Linden Street to the north, South Clinton Avenue to the east, Highland Park, Greenview Drive, and Gregory Hill Road to the south, and then Mount Vernon Avenue to the west. You can see that there are some ins and outs on that in the colors. And these aren't necessarily the final district boundaries. Those are also determined while we're doing our research, while we're writing the National Register nomination. But this is roughly what the State Historic Preservation Office has agreed would be eligible for listing in the National Register. And then we also recently had, not shown here on this map, but the Gregory Tract Historic District, which is kind of in your area as well, was recently listed, going through that finalized process now. So there is going to be the Gregory Tract Historic District as well. Just so you kind of get an idea of what other National Register historic districts there are around Rochester. Off to the side, you can see a list of different existing districts that we already have. And the photograph just shows you the GIS system from the state's website. The areas outlined in purple and kind of infilled with a light pink color, those are existing historic districts around Rochester. So some of those are the Park Avenue Historic District, Cornhill 3rd Ward, which just had an extension done to it, which is what we're doing with the Mount Hope District. East Avenue, Susan B. Anthony, you see Mount Hope Highland in there. South Wedge is also a historic district. In the Maplewood District also went through an expansion, just like the Mount Hope Highland District will be. And basically what an expansion means is that there was a portion that was listed a while back, but with more, with taking a closer look at the area, the state and neighborhood and people, consultants like us at the Landmark Society have determined that there's actually a larger area that's eligible for listing. And so that's when we look at doing an expansion to an existing historic district. So now just to go through the process a little bit so you understand how all of this will work. The projects will be doing all of these nominations kind of ongoing at the same time. A lot of the research will be very similar because the area and the neighborhood sort of developed together around the same time. So we're beginning now in October, doing kickoff meeting, and then we'll be initiating research next. And this whole project, the nominations should be completed by September 2022, which means they'll be sent to the State Historic Preservation Office at that point. So our next step is going to be November through February. We'll be working on research and field work. This includes looking at developmental history of the neighborhoods, looking at the architectural styles, the integrity of the buildings, the streetscapes, and then also doing field work. So we'll be out photographing all the buildings. So eventually you will see us out there, boots on the ground, taking some field notes and photographing all the properties that will be included in the district. We also take streetscape photos as well. But of course, when you see us out there eventually this spring doing that, you are welcome to come out, ask us what we're doing. But that's kind of what all of that involves, the research and fieldwork side. And then that leads to a draft nomination that we send. We plan to have the draft nomination done by March of 2022. That will get sent to our stakeholder committee in your neighborhood. This is the group that we've been working with to put this project together for their initial review. And it also goes to the State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO at that point, for their initial review. And then they'll send back any comments or edits that they have for us. And then we will have the final National Register nominations submitted to the state in August of 2022. With a goal of all of these nominations going before the State Review Board in September of 2022. So the State Review Board, they're the ones that look at all of the National Register nominations across the state that are being written, and they kind of make their determinations, giving it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Generally, if your nomination has made it to the State Review Board, you're likely going to get a thumbs up because you've been working with the State Preservation Office for many months before that, getting this to a finalized stage. From there, as long as you've got the thumbs up from the State Review Board, it moves on to the National Park Service for final listing in the National Register of Historic Places. So once these nominations are completed and all the way through, they'll be listed in both the state register as well as the National Register. So you'll kind of get a twofold, and they're both honorary designations. So what this does is it leads to historic tax credits. So benefits to the National Register, again, very important point, this is an honorary designation, so this will not have any restrictions to you as a private property owner. It promotes heritage tourism and economic development, and it just raises awareness in your community. A lot of people, when we do these projects, learn a lot about their neighborhood that they didn't know before. So that's always fun and interesting. And then, of course, the most common benefit and the one that everybody loves are the historic tax credits that you'll have access to. And then these can also come with other historic preservation grant and loan programs that you become eligible for. Generally, those are for not-for-profit organizations, private foundations, and government agencies. But I know that in your districts, we're mostly talking about individual homeowners. And a lot of times some of these programs, these grant programs and loan programs do funnel back down through to homeowners. So there could be programs that you become eligible for as a listed property in a district. So a little about the historic tax credit programs. The state has both, it's administered by the State Historic Preservation Office, and they have both a homeowner and a commercial program. And then on the federal level, it's a very similar tax credit program administered by the National Park Service, and they just have a commercial. Tonight, we're not going to go over the commercial really because the properties within the districts we're talking about are residential in nature. But if for some reason you have a commercial property, you can certainly contact me and I'd be happy to tell you a little bit more about the commercial programs as well. So what are the tax credits? These are tax credits equal to 20% of your qualified rehabilitation expenses, or QREs. It's a credit off of your New York State income taxes. So basically, once you have done your project, which has to be approved first, so there's a three-part application process. A part one, which is the state saying that you're eligible for the program and you have a historic property. The part two is where you're going to talk about the existing conditions and then the work that you want to do to your property. Once you have those completed, you send them into SHPO and they review, they give you the approval and you move forward with work. And then once you've completed the work, you submit a part three application, which just shows your completed work that you did it according to the approval that you got. And at that point, you claim the credit when you file your New York State income tax return the following year after you've completed a project. So basically, if you were doing a project right now for the tax credits and you submitted for your 20 and you finish this year, you could submit and claim that tax credit when you file your 2021 taxes next year. And if you have questions about the tax credit program, you can either reach out to Caitlin or I, or the state preservation officer who does review the tax credits for homeowners is Christina Vagvolgi, and I've got her information on the screen here, which we can also send out to you if you want to contact us and you need that. It's also on their website, but we're happy to help you through this process. How to qualify? Well, first of all, you have to be contributing structure to a historic district or individually listed. So in this case, with the nominations that we're moving forward, the state does need to receive a draft nomination. So that's that March 2022 date that we're reaching for on the draft nomination. They need a draft nomination before they can start accepting applications from homeowners for tax credits. So just keep that in mind. As of March 2022, you should be able to start putting in applications to use this program. You need to be in a qualifying census tract, which you don't have to worry about because you are. And then it does need to be an owner-occupied structure. So you have to live in the house. There are some provisions for owner-occupied with rental units in them, and you can work with the state on how that works. Generally, though, a fully rental unit, rental property would not be eligible for the homeowner tax credit. You do have to have $5,000 in minimum qualified expenditures, which often can be fairly easy to get to. You might know, as you probably already know as homeowners, but you can also leave your application open for a couple of years. So you don't have to finish all of your projects in 1 year and spend that $5,000 then. I know that Caitlin has been working on a tax credit project at her house and she's had it open for a few years and she just keeps adding to it until she's ready to close it out. A really important aspect of this is that 5% of your total project cost does have to be for exterior work. So if there's something you need to do on the interior of your house and you want to claim tax credits, you want to find something to do on the exterior, whether that's painting or storm windows or something on the exterior. There's also a 2-year recapture period on the tax credit program. What that means is once you've claimed the tax credit, if you do something to your property that doesn't comply with preservation standards, which we'll go over a little bit later, the state can recapture a portion of your tax credit. Generally, those are major things, like let's say you claim the tax credit and then you knock down an entire side of your house and make it 3 times as large from the front. That could be a reason for recapture. And then the work does have to be approved by the state before you begin. So any work that begins before the state has approved your Part 2 application is not eligible for the tax credit. So qualified expenses include everything you see on the screen here. So that's everything from interior, exterior painting, finish repair, roof repair or replacement, chimney work, porch repair or replacement if necessary, interior floors, refinishing or new floors, your repair of windows, and if they're deteriorated beyond repair, replacement of windows. The one that everybody usually seems to be pretty excited to hear is that your systems are also eligible for tax credits. So if you have to repair your HVAC or your electric, plumbing, or you need a new system installed altogether, that is eligible for the tax credit program. So a 20% tax credit on those costs. Basically anything within your building envelope. So we like to say, if you pick up your house and tip it upside down and shake it, anything that doesn't fall out is a qualified expense to your home. And that can also include new kitchens, new bathrooms, and things like that. So,
Megan, can I interject with a question?
Sure.
We have a question. Can you submit for the credit more than one tax cycle? So I'm not sure if this person is asking if you can submit an application multiple times in a year or multiple applications and multiple, submit 1 year and then submit again 3 years later. But either way, why don't you cover all our bases?
Yeah, so generally you can only have one tax credit application open for a single property at a time. If you so I guess the answer to that, if that's how you're asking it, would be yes, you can only have one application open at a time. However, once you've closed out an application, you can keep reapplying. So you're never going to get to the point where they tell you that you've exhausted your tax credit. You can keep reapplying. So it's really up to you. You can leave your tax credit open for a couple of years like Caitlin did and add projects to it, or you can keep closing out with a Part 3 application every time you've completed a particular project. You just have to remember that there always has to be that 5% of your expenses for exterior work too. So that's an important thing to remember.
As well as the $5,000 minimum.
Right.
So it really behooves you, in my opinion, when you prepare your tax credit application, to put as much stuff in there as you think you might want to do in the next several years to get you to that $5,000 expenditure minimum and 5% on the exterior. If you've got a big kitchen remodel that you want to do, but you don't necessarily have any big exterior projects, find something like you want to repaint your front porch, which always needs repainting, to help you get to that 5% of your total project costs on the exterior. And like Megan said, I just want to reiterate that you can, once you have an open application, you can submit amendments to it as you go if your project scope changes or you think of something else that you want to add to it.
Right. So hopefully that answered your question. If not, go ahead and put it back into the chat and we'll try to answer it a little better. All right, so of course, with any program like this, there are also expenses that are not qualified for the tax credit. In this case, like acquisition costs, so purchasing of the property is not eligible for the tax credit. And then unfortunately, outbuildings, detached outbuildings, even if they're historic and contemporary with your historic property, are not eligible for the tax credit. So that's garages or sheds or carriage houses or whatever that might be. However, caveat, if your garage is attached to your house directly, then work to your garage would be eligible. So that's just a little catch with the homeowner program. Then things like new additions or new construction, you can't claim the credit on. Don't let that confuse you with the fact that you can do an addition on your house while you have a tax credit application open. It would be something that the state has to review just to make sure that the work and how it impacts the historic house itself meets the standards, but you can do additions and make some changes to your property. Things like fencing and landscaping, driveways, and then your appliances such as dishwashers and refrigerators, ranges, washing machines, not eligible. And then things like tools. So if you're working on a project and you need to buy a saw or you need a drill, those things are not eligible for the tax credit. However, things like paint, drywall, all of that good stuff, that is eligible, things that actually become part of your building. So as I've mentioned a few times now, your project does have to comply with the preservation standards or the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. And what this is a set of guidelines that were set forth by the Park Service, and they're used to review state and federally funded projects. So when you're doing a tax credit project, these will come into play. And they are meant really just to help provide guidelines towards the appropriate treatment for historic houses. And so there are 10 of these standards in total, but there are 4 key points you get out of these 10 standards. And that's number 1, that the building should be used for its historic purpose or a new use that doesn't require significant alterations of the building. In most of your cases, this wouldn't be an issue because you're homeowners and you'll be doing the homeowner tax credit. You also do need to retain your historic materials and features and repair them. But where they are deteriorated beyond repair, and that is generally beyond repair of a professional, not of, for example, me as a homeowner, if I don't know how to repair it, that doesn't count. So if they're deteriorated beyond repair, then historic materials and features can be replaced. They need to be replaced in kind. So that's matching materials. So that's kind of wood for wood, that sort of thing. And in general, vinyl is never an approvable material, whether that's windows or siding if you're having new put on. But having those in your house right now will not make it doesn't make you ineligible to use the program once you become once your historic district is listed. And then of course, additions or alterations can't destroy the historic materials and need to be compatible. So this is where I said you can actually make changes to your property and put on additions, but the state would need to review it just to make sure how you're attaching it to the house and whatnot, and the size of it and the scale of your addition, that it's actually compatible with the historic home you have. So I know that was kind of a quick run through. So again, I'll just kind of say that we're going to be working on multiple National Register nominations in the Highland Park area, and it'll all be ongoing at the same time. We'll be getting out and starting to do some of our research this fall and into throughout the winter and early spring. And then by the end of early spring, we are going to have a draft nomination for each of these districts into the State Preservation Office for their initial review. And then by the end of August, we will have in the final drafts to the state. And then if all moves along smoothly, your nomination should be with the State Review Board at their September meeting for determination. So I guess with that, I don't know if we, Caitlin and Roxanne, do we want to do questions if anybody has them, or should I go ahead and turn it over to Roxanne first?
Let's see. So we've been working with Roxanne Townsend with the Highland Park Neighborhood Association. So I'll turn it over to Roxanne in case you want to say anything, and then we can open it up to questions. And just please place your questions in the chat. We'll be sure to cover all of them.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming this evening to find out about this program. I've been working with folks at Landmark for well over a year now, first for the Gregory Track and now for this project, so that the majority of Highland Park neighborhood will, at the end of this, will be in a National Register Historic District, which is an advantage to our neighborhood. One thing I want to talk about is funding. We were fortunate enough to receive 2 generous grants from 2 organizations. The Rochester Community Foundation gave us a $10,000 grant for this project, and the Preservation League of New York gave us a $15,000 grant. We still have also Azalea Neighborhood and Highland Park Neighborhood have both contributed funds as well. So we still have about $5,000 to raise, and you can, if you can make a donation, it will be great because we're going to have to scrape that money together somehow. We have it set up on the Highland Park website. highlandparkrochester.org, so that you can make an online donation via PayPal, or there's information there if you'd like to mail in a check. One of the things that's happened since we've started these two projects is Highland Park Neighborhood Association has become incorporated and is now a 501c3 not-for-profit corporation. So this means that, excuse me, any donations that you make are now tax deductible, which is a great advantage as well. So the other thing that is on the Highland Park website about this project is a form where you can submit questions. So we've given you several options of how to ask questions if you have them post this meeting. So I just want to make sure that all our questions are answered, because a year and a half ago when I started this, I had nothing but questions. I'm fairly well versed now, but I know that if this is something you're just hearing about, it can be a little confusing. So thanks a lot, and I'll turn it back over to Caitlin and Megan.
Great. Thank you, Roxanne. And I did put the link in the chat to the donation page on Highland Park's website if you are so inclined. So Megan, one question that we've had is for the National Register nomination, do we need any history on previous owners from folks if they happen to have it on their house?
Sure. So with the National Register Historic District, it's a little bit less on the significance of each individual property and more kind of on the collective whole. However, we do like to include information on some properties that might have a little bit more elevated significance on their own outside of just being part of the collective grouping of buildings. So yes, if you have information on a former owner and they were a significant person in the area, or had something to do with the development of the Highland Park area, or any other interesting information, please do feel free to share that with us. You can send it to my email, which is on the screen there. It's mclem@landmarksociety.org. We'd be happy to look through it, and we'll use whatever we can that fits in with the nomination.
This is a rare thing, but if you do happen to know if your house was designed by an architect, that's always useful information for us. Most folks, this will not be the case, but if you happen to have that information, great, we'd love to have it. Any other questions about the National Register, historic districts, or the homeowner tax credit program? Please just feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll give folks a few seconds in case you're thinking up questions. So we have one question. Is there any way that this process could happen faster? Yeah, believe me, we wish it could as well, because the more folks who can use the tax credit program, the easier it is for us to advocate for it when it comes up for renewal with the state legislature. But yeah, unfortunately, we are working on it as fast as we can. We will have it again in a pretty close to complete form by March, at which point, once the state has been able to review that draft, then folks can be eligible to apply for the tax credit program. And let's see, another question. Where do we get applications? So I can put in the chat, I'll put the link to the state's website where they have the tax credit. They have information and applications on the homeowner tax credit program. But again, realize that won't be eligible until at least March of 2022 to apply, but you can certainly be looking into it in the meantime. Right. So the link is in the chat, and just be sure to scroll down to the bottom where it talks about the homeowners program.
And I do see the question there about we can't begin work until when. So again, if you have something that really needs to be done on your property before winter comes, I mean, we wouldn't advocate for you to hold off on that just because of the tax credit program, although the tax credit program is a wonderful benefit. But if your roof is leaking and before the snow hits, you need a new one, I would encourage you to do so. It just won't be eligible for the tax credit. So as far as how the tax credit works is, the way our process is working right now, you should be able to start submitting applications sometime in March, as soon as the draft nomination has gone, as soon as the draft nomination has gone in. So that'll be by the end of March, the draft nomination will be in. At that point, the SHPO will allow you to start applying, because they'll know that this is an actual nomination moving forward and your house will be eligible for the program. You can't begin work if you want to claim the tax credit on it until you have a Part 2 approval. So once the state gets your application, they generally take about 30 days to review. However, they have been doing it a much quicker turnaround, in about 2 to 3 weeks on the homeowner side right now. Again, they do have about 30 days to review though, but they've been a little quicker. It just depends on how many applications they have in, but you would have to wait. So just know that once you get your Part 2 application in, you have about a 2 to 3 week, maybe 30-day review, and then get the approval and start work.
They do, if you, what they have said in the past too at the state, you know, and obviously I can't make any guarantees of this, but they have said in the past, you know, if you've got a contractor on the line who's ready to start work, you know, a week from when you're turning in your homeowner tax credit application, you know, let the staff at the state know, and they are often willing to kind of fast track your review on that work item.
Caitlin, I just wanted to jump in for a second. One thing that you had mentioned at one point is that the application doesn't just have to be for a single project. I think that would be a good thing to talk about a little bit.
Yeah, so your application, you don't have to only turn in a single project. So your application could include roof replacement, porch painting and repair, and then interior, let's say you had some water damage, interior plaster repair or something, or interior painting. That can all be on one application. So it's not one application per work item. It's multiple work items on one application that you can submit.
And just to give you all an example, so I live in the Park Avenue Historic District, which we spent several, about 3 years trying to get that historic district in place. So I feel your pain on having to wait to be able to use the homeowner tax credit program. But for my tax credit application on my house, I had to do a major repair to my rear porch. I put that on there. I'm going to be repairing my historic windows. That's in there. I'm going to be doing things like putting in more historically accurate light switch covers and electrical plates, like little things like that. So I basically had 3 pages of projects of things that I want to do to my house over the next 5 or 10 years that I put all in one tax credit application. So definitely you can do that. A couple questions in the chat. Does the program provide any protection from acquisition by commercial organizations like Highland Hospital? As this was an issue in the neighborhood about 5 years ago. The short answer is no. Again, because the National Register is an honorary program, it doesn't provide any really protections or any restrictions to private property owners, like the hospital. If there's, the only time you get review is if state or federal funding or permits are being used on a project. So with something like Highland Hospital, just use them as an example. If they're doing a new construction project and they're using private financing to do that, then no, this National Register listing has no effect on it. And also the districts, so I'll leave it at that. We had a couple other questions. After approval of your tax credit application, how much time do you have to complete the actual work?
So you kind of have as much time as you need. You could take just a year and then complete all the work and turn it in after that year. If you're done with all of your projects in 2 months, you can turn in your Part 3. Caitlin, I think you've had your Part 2 open for like
I think it's been a little over a year that I've had mine open. Yeah, 'cause I put it in just before I did my porch project last summer. And
Yeah.
I haven't, and so once you do the work, you file, as Megan mentioned, a part 3 application, or a part 3 that documents that you did the work you said you were going to do in your part 2. I haven't filed mine yet because I'm just going to wait because I'm not particularly anxious to claim my credits. But you can do it, yeah, like Megan said, as quickly or as long as you like.
And you can also, as we said, how you can put multiple work items on there. So Caitlin was telling you about all the stuff she put into her part 2. She doesn't have to wait until all of those work items are done to submit a part 3. She could choose to go ahead and say, all right, I have these 2 projects done. I'm going to submit a part 3 and claim the credit on those. And then she would just submit a new part 2 application with all the other work on it to reopen a new, because it would have to be a new project with the state. And that would reopen that and she could continue on with work. So, you know, just because you put 10 work items in your part 2, it doesn't mean you can't file the claim until all 10 are done.
Another question, Megan, would getting a metal roof as a replacement be a reasonable request if you're using the homeowner tax credits?
So that kind of depends. If you have a metal roof now, they would let you replace in kind. I would say, just from driving around the neighborhood and knowing what I know of it, I generally that would not be an approvable replacement material if you have like an asphalt shingle roof now. So metal would not be something that they would approve, just because it wasn't historically used on the building. So again, the purpose of this program is really to maintain the historic character and appearance of the building. And so a material that would really alter what a certain feature looks like would not be something they would generally approve.
Another question we have.
Using the tax credits, then you can use whatever roof you want.
Yeah, that's an important point. Again, with the tax credit program, you know, you're getting to use the state's money, so you have to play by the state's rules. If you don't want to use the state's money, then again, this National Register Historic District has no effect on you. You can do whatever you want, you know, of course, within the city's zoning code. We had a question about, is the funding for the tax credit program stable, or could it be eliminated at some point? And, you know, when you're in the middle of a project, the way that the state legislature has set up the tax credit program, the homeowners program, is that it does sunset every, I don't know, half dozen or so years. But it's been a really popular program, and every time it comes up, the state legislature renews it. We haven't had an issue or really with that happening because it's such a popular program. So again, that's why I said earlier, you know, the more people who use it, the better, because we, along with our colleagues at the Preservation League of New York State, we advocate very heavily for this program. And it's very popular all across the state. So yeah, is that in the realm of possibility? I'll never say never, but it's very unlikely that would happen.
And I would say, in the unlikely event that the state didn't renew the program, if you already have an approved part 2, I believe they still have to honor it. I think that's how the tax credit program works. So if you already had a part 2 and they decided not to re-up the program, you are still grandfathered into that program.
And Megan kind of mentioned this earlier, but I'll mention it again. If, as we get farther along into this process, of course, Roxanne and Landmark Society will be communicating with folks in the neighborhood to let you know, when you are able to apply for tax credits. If you get to that point and you look at the application and you say, ugh, I can't deal with this is too much. We do offer, through our old house help program, we do offer to complete tax credit applications on your behalf for a fee. And we offer a scholarship for folks who income qualify for us to do that without the fee. So that is an option just to keep in the back of your mind down the road. Any other, let's say we got another question that came in. Is the 5% exterior per each tax? Okay, so the 5%, let me rephrase this. So we talked about how when you submit your part 2, explaining the work that you want to do to qualify for tax credits. 5% of your total project costs have to be on the exterior. So that is for, this person is asking, is that per tax year or per each Part 2 application? That's per each application that you make. And that's why I said, you know, you want to be strategic about what you're putting in your application so that you make sure you're both hitting that $5,000 minimum expenditure threshold and 5% of those total costs are on the exterior. So
Right. Yeah, basically every time you turn in a Part 3 application showing completed work, there has to be at least 5% of the expenses that you're turning in has to be exterior work.
and I see someone, Martin, you've raised your hand. Did you have a question?
Yes, I am coming through, I hope.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I apologize for joining you late. What I wanted to ask is if it's known, or maybe you've discussed it up to this point, that the building that we live in, which is the Ellwanger Berry School 24, we obtained the historic place status for the building around 1997, about that time, both with New York State and with the federal program for historic places. So I don't know where that fits in or what it means in terms of what you're working on now. That turned out to be, at that time, and I was one of the people working on it, it was very simple to do. There was paperwork to complete, but it didn't take us very long. And we have certificates which are posted in our gym. If you've been in our building, or maybe you know one way or another, the gym was not turned into condominiums. So it's the same as it was when the place was bought by whatever that fellow's name was for $1, who turned it into condominiums.
Yes, so you're correct. The Ellwanger Berry School was individually listed in the National Register several years ago, and so what the creation of a historic district around Ellwanger Berry, it doesn't have any effect. You will be individually listed, and you'll also be part of a historic district. It's really all, practically speaking, has the same. It has the same effect.
I hope it cultivated the ground a little bit.
Yeah, and you know, I believe that was a tax credit project a commercial tax credit project at that time.
Well, I'm not sure what all of our motives were. I don't think, maybe we haven't made use of advantages of having that status. Maybe it was just ego satisfying. I don't know.
Well, yes, and again, you know, like Megan talked about, it's a nice feather in your cap, and for the neighborhood, having this larger district is a nice, it's a nice little marketing tool. Any other questions out there? All right, well, we've kept you for about an hour, and I don't want to take up any more of your evenings. Thank you all for joining us. We have recorded this, so again, it'll be up on our YouTube, and since you registered for the Zoom, you'll get an email with that link. Feel free to share that with your neighbors. And again, reach out to myself, Megan, or Roxanne if you have any questions that we didn't cover tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much.